Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Deliberate Dad podcast, the podcast that gives you the tips, tricks, actions that you need to live your life more deliberately. So I'm really happy today to have the wonderful Phil, a good friend of mine, and the founder of Ash and Gold. And he is a relationship and integration specialist and coach. Hello, Phil.
Yeah, Steve, mate, how's it going?
Yeah, good mate, good mate. And obviously, you always lead with professional chat, don't you? But obviously, most important job is dad to Fred, George, and Eleanor, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. That's what underpins everything in life.
Yeah, totally. And I listed off the three there, but I
Yeah,
didn't. I negated to add that you've got a set of twins in there, right?
I do. Yeah, we had our not even 3 year old, and then we had found out we were having twins during COVID, so we were navigating that, and now we've got triple fun, I guess.
But you're out of the baby twin stage now, right? They're little bit older, but like as you said, obviously, the podcast is called the Deliberate Dad Podcast,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being a dad like underpins a lot of, well, not a lot, everything that we
Mm.
do ultimately, right? And everyone that I talk to and work with, and I'm sure the same with you as well. But we all have different versions, right, of like what living a deliberate life is, or what a deliberate dad is to them, right? And that's why there's the beauty in it, right? My life's different to your life, my version's different to your
Of
version, so
course.
I'm really like interested and curious to know what your version of being a deliberate dad is, or living a deliberate life.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, there's a few components to it. And the first one that I've really had to work on over the years would be presence. And being present in the moment when it's more difficult to be. So when you finish after a long day of work, and this is both my experience and that of people I've worked with, but when you finish a long day of work, and you get home and there's just noise and they're demanding attention or they're fighting and things like that, to be present in those moments, or when you're exhausted because you've been up all night feeding twins, and then the other child wants to read a book, having presence in that moment, and not just doing the easy thing of zoning out on your phone or the telly, or numbing out with it with drink and things like that. I've really focused on presence, and for me that really kind of ties into that deliberateness, that I really try and cultivate. Am I perfect at it? No, but I'm getting better all the time. And another thing that I would say is holding the understanding that you're there to just provide tools for them to go out in the world, and that it's okay for them to make mistakes. It's okay for them to be imperfect. It's okay for them to push boundaries. That you're just there as a guide rather than a set blueprint that they have to follow. Yeah, I think those two things are all not always on my mind, because that makes it sound insane, but they're always like that's always what I'm working on. Always, always, always. And the third thing is really being aware that I am their example, for my boys, of how a man can be in the world, and for my daughter, how a man should be in the world, and wanting to just show them the option of a way to be, and I wouldn't expect them to follow it, and I wouldn't expect them to um you know want to be it even, but to show up and be kind and to listen and try and make a difference and work hard, and but still be self-reflective, empathetic, all that stuff that I work on. For me, I want to always show them an example of a way to be, and not be attached to them following it, but showing them that, actually, if I've got a problem, I can self-reflect on it. Even if it's an emotional problem, I can self-reflect on it, and I can work on it, on the inner things, and it's okay for a man to be whatever I am in that moment. That's my three
Yeah, love that.
components. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, what I was getting from that, Phil, when you were talking, it was making me, like you mentioned a couple of times about not being perfect, right? Or not necessarily being attached to the outcome or not being a blueprint, but being more of a guide. And I suppose like my version of that deliberateness is like having the intention plus taking the action. And that's sort of what you were talking about, like with the present stuff. Oh, I'm not perfect all the time, but you're intending to go down this path and you're taking the action to do it. And it's not about you completely nailing it all the time or flicking and checking the football scores the odd time when they're on, right? Like I do that as well. But it's, that 80-90% of time that you have that intention plus action
Yeah,
to be able to do it. Because I think like when I was thinking about this word deliberate, there was loads of people that were like intentional dad or I've got good intentions, but actually intentions are really bullshit without actually doing anything with it,
yeah,
right? Like I think everything that you were talking about there as well, set an example for your kids or being the guide is they see what you actually do, right? Not what you think.
yeah.
Right? Like the
That's right.
guide is the actions that you actually take. So I think, it's just interesting you talking about those three pillars, but a lot of it is based on the things that you actually do, right? Like the actions that you take.
Yeah, 100%. And being, like you say, with intentions and actions, it's almost inevitable that we will consistently fail. Having an acceptance and an awareness of that, and I was talking to you earlier about a course I just did with David Chambers, and one thing that kind of really stuck with me was he always would say failure and recommit, failure, recommit, and just repeat until you kind of get there. Because you will fail, but it's about whether that's going to knock you off or whether that's going to spur you on to recommit to the path, to the cause, to whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I really like that. So, like, how do you stay on track then when you perceive yourself to have failed?
How do I stay on track? In the moment, especially around being a dad, fatherhood. That's really what we're talking about here. I really find it important to provide context. So if for some reason I have zoned out, or I have lost my temper, or I have whatever it is, and what I would mark as failure, I will go to them and I will say, I'm sorry that this happened. This is why. I expect better of myself. I will try to do better next time, and providing that context consistently. Because I don't think that our parents' generation, I don't think they were ever taught to provide context. It was always just, all right, well now Dad's mad. I don't really get what's going on here, or he seems like my mom's irrationally upset over something, not understanding the context of she's had a long, busy day, or something awful's happened at work. And so what me and my wife consistently try to do is provide that context. So things might not be perfect, but at least they make sense, and they're not there like, well, I don't know what mood they're going to be in today, or what's going to happen. There's always that explanation. Context is key.
Yeah, yeah. So, and even if they don't like fully get it, which they won't, they get used to that behavior from me, right? Like it's
Exactly.
not just completely independent from any kind of context.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's not just the children I do that with. It's something that I brought into my relationship and things like that. And I'm always willing to admit that, look, I was wrong on that one. This is why I was that way. I'm not saying it's right, but that's the context for it. Context.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I suppose with the context, you've got to communicate effectively, right? To be able to do that. So again, admitting to yourself that you haven't acted in the way that you wanted to act, creating some context in your mind for a reason why you did it, right? It's not
Yeah,
you're a bad person. There's usually some kind of thing attached to it, but then be able to actually communicate it effectively. And I'm sure you've seen this in like a lot of your work, and same with my relationships, right? Totally. like being a better communicator,
Yeah.
being able to actually talk rationally,
Yes.
non-emotionally, like just makes everything a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. One of the great things that I've really worked on myself and with others as well is stating what it is you want out of the conversation you're about to have. And what I was really doing a lot of work on, like vulnerability and things like that. And when I was being vulnerable, I was always left a little bit upset that people perhaps didn't react in the way I wanted them to. So I would share something, and like I would share something with a mate, and they would just be like, "All right," and like stone faced, "Oh man, what is that?" Like I left feeling awful. And what I learned to do was, prior to engaging the conversation, if it's something, like if it's a conversation that carries some emotional weight, is to just say like, "Look, I'm going to share this with you. I don't need you to do anything with it, but I just need to get it off my chest, or I really need your opinion, or I really need some comfort in this." And really stating what you want out of the conversation. And to a lesser extent, I do it with the children, but I really try and put forward what I want. So if I'm kind of trying to get a message across to the kids about being respectful, I'll say, "Look, I'm going to share this with you, and what I want from you is to really try and understand it and take it on and move forward with it. Versus, you should be more respectful. You just should." And again, it's just providing that little bit of a container for the. I don't know if the container is the right word. I don't like that. A lot of coaches say container, but yeah, it provides that little bit extra to help people understand it and where you come from. And I cannot tell you, since doing that, how fewer miscommunications, misunderstandings that I've had. It's really worked wonders.
Now, it makes me think of, I listened to something with Simon Sinek the other day,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he was sort of talking about it from the other person's perspective.
Okay.
So, it's a very similar thing, but like rather than the person who's starting the conversation communicating it,
Mm,
like when, say, you were in the pub, your friend starts telling you this story, and then before you respond, asking them what they want from it as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
that's
it's probably
good.
dual sides. So again, do you want me to just sit in the mud with you? Was his
Yeah.
articulation of it? Just feel the pain, whatever. Like, just listen, or do you want some advice? Do you want me to do something? Do you want some help with that, or do you not? Either way is completely
Mm,
fine with me.
yeah, yeah.
But I think like the default man perspective is to try and be the fixer, right?
Oh,
Whereas
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes, and I like totally, I'm guilty of it. But
Absolutely.
sometimes people just want you to listen to them, and there is no real solution in the short term.
Well, the thing with that is that I would say most times people just want you to listen. Like, unless someone directly says, "Please help me with this situation," I think that one, you do them a massive disservice, because what you're saying is, "I don't think you have the tools to figure this out. Here's me, big brain, giving you the solution." Even though I know it's not necessarily overtly said, but that is the underlying context, is that I think that you can't do this. So here's me. And it's just, if you are formulating a plan in your head of how to fix the situation, you're not really listening to what the person's saying. You're not really trying to understand how they feel. And that's why people end up feeling not seen, not heard. And I've been in relationships like that, and it sucks to feel that way. And because it's quite a difficult, intangible thing to voice, that you don't feel heard or that you don't feel seen. And sometimes it can be even difficult, especially as blokes, we're not really taught to identify that kind of emotion. When you're left with that feeling, it just kind of, it doesn't get labeled, it doesn't get acknowledged, and you're just kind of left with it. So yeah, it's a big thing. Trying not to fix. Um, yeah, like
Just when you were talking about like labeling it or recognizing it, it just like when you were talking there, it just made me think of a couple of specific scenarios where that's happened to me, right? And it doesn't also necessarily need to be like the relationships thing. One of the examples I was thinking about with work stuff, right?
oh yeah,
Where, you've got like this idea, or you're in a challenging period, right? I mean, working for yourself is always a fucking challenging period, right? But there's ups and downs. But recently I remember like talking to a couple of mates, and I'm the only one that can really work out the path that I want to go on. And
Mm.
yes, like I think there was a lot of immediate fixing. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And actually, that solution almost muddied my thinking, right?
Yeah.
Even more, which made me feel even worse
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than,
Absolutely.
feeling better. Actually, usually there's some kind of rumination in the person's head
Yeah.
when they're thinking about some kind of solution, or maybe they don't even want to think about the solution yet, but actually throwing advice in or throwing unsolicited advice in actually can be a detriment.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing as well. I went for a walk with this other coach. We met in this group and we went for a walk the other day, and we were talking about the man's capacity to overthink things, and how, especially in our line of work, we are and we come across a lot of deep thinkers, should we say, or people who are certainly willing to think about things. And yeah, you're absolutely right. To throw more thoughts into that is just, man, it's just like it's adding things to the buffet plate that do not fit on the buffet plate. You're just overspilling at that point. So yeah, I've actually, like, one of the big things I've worked on with a couple of guys this year is the idea of not thinking what can I do extra to get to a goal, but what can I start taking away? And almost in that, I always find if I am stuck, if I am in a funk, I look around, I'm like, right, what can I remove? Whether that is, right, what distractions can I remove? What's really cluttering in my office? What actions am I taking? What hobbies am I doing? What things can I take away that's going to create a clearer path for my mind to figure out what the answer is? Works pretty much every time.
Totally.
And,
Totally.
and
And like you were, oh, sorry.
no, that was involuntary noise.
I thought I'd interrupt you.
No.
I broke the coach rule there. Um, yeah, no, I suppose a couple of things I was thinking about there when you were talking, this idea of like the people that come to work with us being deep thinkers and maybe have too many thoughts. And it sort of like goes back to the action part, right? So like
Oh
I
yeah.
think the people that come to me generally are either in two camps. One are they probably need to do a little bit of reflection to get an idea of where they're going because they've just been head down and have been taking a lot of actions that don't necessarily align with what they want their life to be, right? Like they're on that default path rather than the deliberate one. Whereas the other side is like, yes, it's actually these deep thinkers that have shitloads of ideas and great strategies and opinions, but actually they're stuck in the wrong side on the, like I have like in my mind a reflection action pendulum almost, right? And they need to like swing it across to the action part
Yeah.
to get a bit of information, to get a bit of data,
Yeah.
to actually know what path they want to go on, because having all these like ideas in their heads, unless you actually action some, get some
Yeah. I mean,
evidence, then it's really difficult to know.
there was this really good diagram. I believe I saw it on a Mel Robbins video years ago, and it was it was the self-doubt loop. Don't quote me on that, but it was, let's call it that for now. And it was, when you overthink, I'm going to literally draw it with my hand here. When you overthink a situation, you get yourself into a state of inaction because you're thinking about things too much. You don't take the action. So time has now passed more, and then you start thinking about how time has passed more. So you take a less action, and you get stuck in this loop. And then there was this other loop, which is over here, which was, you take action, you either succeed in it or you fail, and understand that the failure is now giving you more information so that when you take action the next time, you're coming at it from a more knowledgeable place. And eventually you start building self-confidence. Like, this is the self-doubt one and this is the self-confidence one. And yeah, it's I'm a big proponent of that. Big proponent of taking action, but also being okay that the action might result in something you don't want, and being okay with that and being like, right, okay, I've learned that now. I'm now more knowledgeable versus, well, I've done nothing. I'm not more knowledgeable, and I have no closer to my goal, which is where a lot of people are, unfortunately.
I like the idea of almost everything you do is a science project,
Mm.
right? Like acting like a
Yeah, yeah,
scientist within your own
yeah.
life, right? And almost this idea of looking outside yourself, that idea of, friends or how you'd help them, like looking at the experiments that you run objectively and not letting them mean anything about you as a person, right? So, like having a hypothesis, like every science experiment ever, I think this will get me to this goal that I want.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple different ways that I could get to this goal, but I'm choosing to act on this one. And I'm going to run this experiment for X amount of time and then see what happens, right? And then at the end of it, I can look at the results. Did I get to the goal? Yes or no? Why? If it's a no, was it through my inaction? Was it through some fault of mine in some way? And a lot of the time, it probably isn't, right? So therefore, what learnings, what data can I take the next time?
Yeah,
Exactly what you said, right? To run another experiment. And again, it's like exactly what you said. It's, taking the action creates the information, creates the data to be able to do it next time.
yeah.
And it's not about judging yourself on outcomes. It's like being honest with yourself on the actions that you said you would take, doing the things that you say you were going to do.
Yeah, and it like in a really simplified way. My son has this little Mario card game, and it's just the one I don't know what you call it, like pairs maybe, where you put them all face down, and you've just got to flip them over and find pairs. You just build in constant wrongs until you find, all right, well this goes with this, and then just building up that knowledge bank of where things are, how things go, till you find like two Goombas, and then you're laughing.
Mine's with I've got the Peppa memory game. Mine are with Daddy Pig and Mummy
Yeah,
Pig at the minute.
sure. Mine's all about Mario right now, so I've relearned all of the Mario characters.
I love that. I love that. This is sort of looping a little bit back, Phil, but
Okay.
it's sort of on the topic of action, right? I think like one of the things that stops people, you know, reaching out for help or assistance to a coach or whatever is like they feel really stuck, right? They feel overwhelmed. It's really difficult to get out of that loop, sort of what you talked about, that inaction loop. And usually there's some kind of trigger that helps them do that, right? There's something that happens that helps them progress. Like, I'd love to hear your story about that, right? Like, because obviously, you had a career before here. And what was
Uh,
it that, prompted you to live a more deliberate life and go down the path that you're on?
yeah, absolutely. So I worked in finance for 17 years. It was my first job. It was my first, like a weekend job. I worked in the bank. I don't know if you've ever been in a bank that opens on a Sunday, but it's not good. I tried to quit in the first week. I was told that you can't do that because it was a job that my parents pushed for me to get. It would reflect badly, blah blah blah. So stayed in there 17 years, mostly out of guilt. Hated it. It was soulless. It was vapid. It was all of the bad things. And I was we just had our first son. We just had Fred, and I was driving home from the bank, and there was this woman on the radio. I remember clear as day. It was nighttime, but yeah. Um, and she said, "I don't know how I can look at my daughter and tell her to follow her dreams when I go and I work on a checkout all day every day and I'm miserable." And that hit me like a fucking train to the head. And I was just like, oh my God, like what? I became so aware, and it was quite new. It was my first child. It was things were still settling in, but that was such a moment of awareness of I need to take responsibility for who I'm being in the world, and what message am I sending them if I go to if I settle for something that I've hated for 17 years and I'm miserable at, and all I talk about is how miserable I'm at. I was kind of just I got home and my parents had come down to visit, and I remember Caroline just handed me Fred as my parents were leaving because she wanted dogs and say bye. And I just broke down like a big blubbering idiot, and I was like, I need to make a change. So what I did, I made a big list of everything I liked about work and everything I hated about work, and I was trying to hit more of these and avoid some of these. And it turned out that I found counseling and then psychotherapy as study options. Went off, learned to do that, worked in that for quite a while. And then during COVID, I'd been assigned a string of really, what should we say, therapists that didn't quite match what I needed. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to try something different. And so just before COVID, I tried a coach in the local area, Jude, which is fantastic, Jude Dawn. And I was like, this is it. This is exactly this bridges the gap of what I'm looking for, in that I felt like in therapy, I was just learning loads and loads and loads, but not understanding how to put it into practice and how to take action with it. And coaching was very much that. And then I went and I studied with Jay Shetty and got qualified there. And I've never looked back. It's the best. That is how I ended up in coaching. Just this deep desire to show my children what is possible. And I try every day to do that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, mate.
Yeah. No bother.
I
Phil.
I sort of what you were saying there as well, like almost leads right back to your very first answer, right? Of like what that deliberate dad is, acting as a guide and showing your kids like what's possible rather than just saying, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and I think, sorry, mate, but I do think it's a really important point. Also, I'm not a golden rule of culture. We don't cut each other off. Although that would just be us sitting in silence for a long time. I think it's really important to realize that comes with, it's not just setting the good example, but kids watch everything. They watch the way you eat, the way you respond to defeats, the way you, just the way you do everything. And that includes the bad behaviors. That really hit me as much as, I need to go out and I need to really work on myself and really start setting the good example. I also need to at the same time address the things that I do that perhaps weren't super healthy, the super healthy habits, and realize that that's a part of it as well. And that's really why I would encourage people to work on themselves, to do the harder stuff.
like it's hard to see the harder stuff if you're not aware of it.
Absolutely. Well, and again, going back to another point was said, guys aren't often given the language to identify that. So it's really hard. I know that when I first went to a therapist, it was really hard and to verbalize where I was at. And I remember I just kept saying, I feel this sense of wrongness. I feel this inner sense of wrongness. And obviously that unfolded, and I learned a lot more about that. A lot of guys aren't planning to become therapists, so they don't get into the weeds of it. And they're not kind of guided along on it. So I think it's all right for guys to just act on that gut feeling, that to act on that. I know I need to address something, and I don't necessarily need to know what that is, but I trust that I'm going to find somebody who will help me figure out what it is, and that's huge, because it's a lot of guys have these things, but they don't know what it is, they don't know why it's there, but they know that it's there.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that as well people might have heard my story as well. It's like, in moving into coaching and big like career moves and all of this stuff. But like a lot of that starts with tiny action, right? So like you see me talking about this, you see you talking about this a long time after. But your first day of chatting with a therapist or that day, it wasn't like, right, I'm ripping up, I'm quitting my job, I'm doing this. That resulted after lots of tiny, tiny moves. I didn't qualify being a coach, like, and changing career probably like 4 years after I went to my first coaching session. What I did, like,
Yeah.
straight away was lots of little things. You know, how could I make my day to day work life a lot better? Make it aware, like, be super aware of it, think about the things, do the list like you did, and go, what can I act on now? There's some things that I can't control, totally, but what
Oh
can
yeah.
I act on now? If I feel like I'm not doing purposeful work, or I feel like I could do something more purposeful in my life, then how else could I do that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I went and volunteered somewhere for like a day a month, and that was as an experiment to see whether that worked for me. Or I was working in advertising and production before, and I just felt it was all a bit pointless, right? I was like, I'm making these
Yeah.
like Instagram ads for cooking sauce companies, and I really don't give a shit about this. What's the point of everyone getting stressed about this? But then it was like, well, maybe I'll try and pick up a couple of projects in charity sector, right? And I
Hmm.
did, to go, all right, this is actually doing something good in the world. How do I feel? What is the experiment
Yeah.
telling me now? And it was sort of like, well, no, actually, maybe that's not it. Like, I need to be more in the coal face of things. But I
Mm.
wouldn't have known any of those things if I hadn't taken some kind of smaller action. Like, I think that the
Yeah.
bridge in people's minds feels like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to articulate this. I've got all these feelings. Like, I look at Phil, who's done this big fucking thing. It feels so far away. But
Yeah.
actually, the first thing that you did was sit down there with a piece of paper and
Yeah.
have a coffee and go, like, what do I like and what do I don't like, and try and do something about that in the short term.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there was a word that you said in there that I'm really glad that you brought up, and that was control. And I think that there's a lot of guys out there who feel like they don't have control of what they are, whether that is, they. I know that I felt like that when I was at work. I was like, well, I can't find a job that I like, and I can't leave this one because of guilt. So I've got no control of what I'm going to do. It can come out as, oh, I don't know what my emotions are, so I can't address them. So therefore, I'm not in control. This is just the way it is. And there's just millions and millions of little things where we kind of give up control and think that this is just the way it is. I am just this way, and it can't be worked on, and that's never the case. Everyone always has a choice. There's always choice, and we might not like the choices, and we might, some choices might make things harder for a little bit or what have you. But there's always that choice to, like you say, take the action. There's always that choice to do the experiment. There's always going to be reasons you can think of that, like, not to. But if you can surrender a little bit, you have the control to make that choice. Always, always, always.
Like, at the start, with lots of things, the short term path to this deliberate life
Mm.
is harder.
Oh
Right,
yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah.
the easier short term thing for you to do is to just put those feelings down, have a few extra beers in the pub, and work there for an extra 10 years, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
theory,
absolutely.
but like, just in the moment, because your mind like craves that comfort. Your
Absolutely.
mind doesn't want you to do something different. Your mind doesn't
Mhm.
want you to have that conversation
Yeah.
with yourself or with other people. But it's like you said earlier, I had to take responsibility for my own life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, is this getting too in the weeds? Let's go into it. But the ego, is like, psychologically, is our idea of who we are, our sense of self. And over that is really what I meant by feeling like we don't have control. You are this designated thing. You are this, for even the bad parts are you. So if you think, oh, I'm a lazy person, for example, if you've bought into that message, you've been fed that message so much as a young man, by the time you get older, you've embodied this message. You know, it is part of you. You make decisions from the I am lazy underpinning everything else, and it's really not a fixed thing. It's not this. It's not this. Not death sentence, but it's not this thing that you're sentenced to be. You have the power to choose to move into other things. You know, like you did, like I did, but the ego really wants to keep itself alive because it knows that by, you know, even if you are lazy, well, we know what that is. We know that's comfortable. We know we keep ourselves alive. But what's like on the other side of not being lazy? What if he was not lazy? Well, all of these kind of things can happen. You go out the house for a jog and get hit by a car, and your mind will start working like that. So it's like it's better to just be lazy. So you're always fighting that as well, you know, until you can really dissolve that fixed ego or this fixed idea of who you are. Yeah, it's which is doable, but with work, like you say, that's the hard bit. But it will keep fighting for itself, which is why people are always end up in, well, not people, but I know certainly guys end up in the, how am I back here? Why am I doing this again? You know, even though I know this is bad for me, why am I having another drink? Why am I, whatever it is, why am I hungover again? That's because the ego wants to keep you safe, but you know that's not always super healthy.
It's not it doesn't really give a shit about your long term potential or what you actually want, right? It's interesting when you were talking about, like, I suppose that past and future frame. Whereas, like, logically, when we look back, I really like asking people this question around, are you the same person as you were 10 years ago? Right? And people go, like, fuck, of course not. Like, all I give a shit about was drinking Fat Frogs and Infernos and Clapham on a Saturday night, right? That was me. So, you know, your values, what you care about, all of those things are, there's, of course, there's some things that are the same, but
Yeah,
a lot of it would be different. Or 20 years ago, when you're a 18-year-old to a 38-year-old man with two kids, of course, I'm different. But we struggle looking forward to go, well, of course, we're going to be different as a 48-year-old person and a 58-year-old person. And sort of exactly what you said. It feels like we always think in the moment that our personality, our ego is fixed.
mm-hmm.
But actually, of course, it's not, because all the evidence suggests that when you look backwards at your life, you're not the same person. So why would it be any
Yeah,
different moving forward? And maybe, you know, you've defaulted to this, you know, version of your ego. You haven't really been deliberate or intentional with what you've tried to create yourself to be. Whereas now you, like, if you've got that awareness and go, well, I don't like this idea of, you know, me being a unconfident person, or I don't like this
mm-hmm.
idea of all these labels that I've put on myself. And I remember one that I really had was like, I don't commit to things. I had this like thing in my mind from a couple of business ventures that I left, and I'm like, I'm really shit at like committing to myself. And then when you look back and challenge the evidence of that and go like, well, I've got a fucking baby in there, right? Like, I've got a wife, I've got like friends that I've had for like 20 years. Like, that's a commitment, right? And just because
Yeah,
I'm looking at it through this like narrow lens, I've created this narrative on my head that's stopping me taking actions on something because I'm scared, because I'm not a person that commits to things, when
yeah,
actually it's just the ego's telling me that this is this label of me. One, you can challenge it, and two, you can take the action to change it.
yeah, massively. You become blinkered, don't you? Your ego will ignore things that go against what that message you've been told to be. So it'll ignore all the times you were confident and highlight the ones where you weren't.
Yeah, totally. The one thing I wanted to quickly move on to, Phil, because I know we're flying through time here, was like, you obviously talked about this idea of personal responsibility. We had this conversation about it, and it obviously comes down to the individual to do that. But, you know, one of the things that I find in my work, and also just personally, right, like, actually having conversations, actually being supported by mates, friends, peers, colleagues, a group of men, has been like super valuable
Yes.
to me. But interestingly, I don't think that, and this is my opinion, I don't know whether men value that ahead of their own individual progress. So, like, as in they take this responsibility, they feel like it's all on them, but they don't work collectively. So, I suppose, like, you've worked with men both individually and collectively. Like, what would you say is the difference, and what are the benefits and
Hmm.
pros and cons of both?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that group work is so valuable, and it is unparalleled in the things that it can do that working individually can't. And I think, especially as men, we think we are the only ones with with problems X, Y, or Z. We're the only ones who've done these things. We live with shame. We live with guilt. We're told every day how terrible men are, and things like that. And this isn't a pushback against it, but I'm just saying that that's the reality. That's the lived experience. And to the idea of taking that in front of a group of guys, and this probably comes like from the schoolyard and things like that. If you went to school and you started telling people about your problems, you were going to get ridiculed. You were going to get mocked for it. You were going to get a stupid new nickname. That's just the way guys work. We lash out. We do it when we're uncomfortable. As children anyway. And so we get brought up to not share, because sharing it is blood to sharks. And I think what I would encourage people to do is really understand that people move past that. And if you find the right space, especially if it's a space that is led by someone who knows what they're doing, then the people within that group are usually supportive. It's usually a space of non-judgment. What I would say is the one-on-one work is really important. We were talking about this earlier. I don't think you can have. I think the best method for people's progress is a mix of the two, because there's things that you can do in one-on-one where you can go deeper. You can really get into the weeds with the individual that maybe you can't in the group work. But what you can do in the group is the amount of times that, and going back to our previous conversation, the amount of times that I have felt something but haven't had the words to put to it, and someone else just phrases it in a certain way, and it doesn't have to be like this big, revelatory thing, but a guy will just say something, and I'm just like, that's it. That's the feeling I've been having. Or when I've shared something in the group, and another guy's, yeah, that's exactly like we've all felt that, and that experience happens like pretty much every week that I'm in a group. Is that someone shares something, everyone else says, "Oh yeah, I've had that too," and then the guy's just like, "Oh my god, I thought I was the only one." It's just that repeated into infinity. So I think it's important in the group to understand that you can be supported, you can share these things, and you can, create accountability and support while doing the deeper work on yourself in the one-to-one, which I still think is essential. It gives you things to take to the group. You get a better understanding of yourself, a deeper understanding of yourself, and you can start taking, more than the surface level things into the group, which I think is really important.
I suppose I like my thoughts on group stuff were exactly what you were saying there about, that whole idea of I didn't know it was just me comes up all the time, right? Like someone shares something in a slightly different context, and almost even being in it and not sharing is beneficial for lots of people, right? Just to
Yeah.
actually listen to what other people are saying, like sometimes helps them get some of that control back, right? Like seeing how other people have moved through things. I also think that like guys have this perception that it's a bit, I don't know how best to articulate this without saying wanky, but
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of like group scenario. But it does
It's
like
wanky, mate.
also, but it like it also doesn't have to be, right? Like I think like there's this like idea that um community of guys are almost like this holier than thou. It's like in a shitty like place with terrible coffee or whatever, right? You know, like this
Right.
vision. I think this is the perception that a lot of people, when I talk to, like this idea. Whereas, you know, like some of the stuff that I've tried to do, and I know you have as well, is like create it in environments that men are comfortable with. So I've done some stuff in
Yeah.
pubs. You know, I did like a dinner in like a spa, all of this stuff. So I think it's like the act of actually being together as well, and natural,
Yeah.
like definitely having a facilitator in some circumstances, but also being put in an environment with like-minded men. Conversation naturally occurs. So you know, you talked about some of the guys coming together in your group have this like fill lens, which is a positive.
Yes.
Like totally, we were talking about having another aspect to it, but like it's a positive thing because they've all been doing the work with you, so therefore they think in a
Yes.
slightly different way. So again, like,
Yes.
you know, the conversations that I've had with men in a group, or even if I'm just overhearing some that they've had at dinners, because they're all know that they're sort of aligned on the same path, this idea of being a
Mm.
deliberate dad, the conversation just naturally flows into things
Sure.
that are actually beneficial for them. And some of it
Mm.
is surface level, totally. And they talk
Yeah.
about football and they can, you know, take the piss out of someone's
Yeah.
swimming
Yeah.
shorts in the spa, totally. I think that's
Mm.
super valuable as well. But it
Mm.
also talks about, you know, how they use this to have this conversation with their wife, or how
Yeah.
they were able to get over that in work. And it's sort of, but by creating the environment to put them together, like it allows those conversations to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't, right?
Yeah. And I think one thing that I've seen that it comes up again and again, and it is men are afraid to enter those spaces. One, because of the wankiness, like you say, the perceived wankiness. Sorry, because I think there's, you know, you get those pictures of and there's, you know, everyone likes their own things and stuff, but like loads of guys hugging in a stream and things like that. Oh well, you know, there's the more extreme versions, and you know, I have not experienced that in a group. It might be wonderful, but that's not what I do. But I think this is real hesitance in guys, or certainly some guys, to take up space, and they feel that they will go into a group and be a wallflower, and they really got that message of don't go in there, don't take up space, don't take up time, and the thought of going into a group like that is really off-putting for a lot of people. But what I would say is that, you know, if you are hearing this and this sounds like you, then for me, that is exactly where you need to do the work. You know, you need to be comfortable with taking up space and knowing your value. And I don't mean like shouting and things like that, but, you know, being able to be authentic with yourself and really speak when you need to speak and get things off your chest and take part in the discussion. And I say that as someone who really was terrified of taking up space and how to do work on that. And yeah, I think that is something that holds a lot of guys back, not just the perceived wankiness.
The combination of both. I should have thought of a more articulate term
Mm.
to describe that, but I think no, I think you're totally right. And this isn't a judgment thing, me saying this, by the way, but it's what I thought of it, right? As well, totally. And I
Oh,
think
sure.
like there is environments like that that will be perfect for some people, totally, right? Like, and again, no judgment on that. But for a lot of people, or not for me, it's not. It wouldn't be appealing to me particularly. So I think
No.
like, but understanding that there is other versions of it,
Mm.
like you sort of
Yeah.
said, if they wanted to partake in it.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a lot of this in the coaching space that people get into very black and white ideas of what something is. Like I know I used to have that with things like meditation. I'd be like, not for me. Tried it loads of times. Mine's too busy. Not for me. And once I started letting go of the idea of there was a right way to do it, then I started to get it. And it's you know, it's for me. It's personal. Um, and you know, now it's a big part of my life. But there's lots of little things like that in coaching where if you can surrender that idea that it needs to be this exact way and that there's a right or wrong way to do it, and just lean into it and see what's there for you, I think there's a lot of gold that can be got out of that.
And I think that like sort of rounds the whole conversation off quite nicely, right? This idea of the question I asked you at the beginning, like what is a deliberate dad or what is your version of a deliberate life? We all have different versions of it. There's all different routes to get there. There's things that will
Yes.
be right for some people and things that will be right for other people. And it's okay, but it's around, having that awareness, the courage to take responsibility for your own life, that agency to experiment and explore, right? Like without attachment, treating things as an experiment and finding
Yeah,
the thing that's right for you ultimately.
absolutely. And being like life is tough. You are going to fail. Just commit to recommitting and just keep going and keep going. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right, man. Beautiful.
especially when you've got twins, when you've got a 3-year-old. Life is
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
But amazing, Phil. Thank you so much. It's been really super interesting conversation. I've actually really
Mm-hmm.
loved I know we went down a rabbit hole a couple of times, but I've really enjoyed the depth on a couple of these
Good.
points, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy that as well.
It's been a pleasure, man.
So if people have enjoyed this conversation, where can they find out more about you?
Man, so you can find my LinkedIn, which is Phil Airson. You can drop me an email, which is thepmacoaching@gmail.com.
Cheers.
Or
I
yeah,
remember to send this invite.
that's right. PMA is my initials, which if people ask that. You can also go to the website, which I haven't managed to update yet, but I think if you go to thebettermanproject.co.uk, you can still find all of my stuff on there. I would encourage you to find me on LinkedIn.
And I'll drop the link to your LinkedIn in the description. But yes,
Cheers,
thank you so
dude.
much for it. Very
Yeah.
much appreciate it.
Do you think we've set a new record for the amount of times the word wanky was said on a coaching podcast?
Potentially. I know you came in with
If we haven't set the record, then I really want to hear the podcast that did.
amazing, Matt. Well, thank you so
Oh,
much. I'm sure we'll do round 2 at some point. Cheers, Phil.
I'm sure we will, mate. Cheers, mate. Bye bye.
Thanks, Matt.